मैंने अपना एडमिशन लेके और अपना शिक्षा ग्रहण किया और आज मैं इस स्थिति में हूँ। तो क्या इस नई शिक्षा नीति में जो भारत की अवधारणाओं को लेके आता है, तो क्या इस शिक्षा नीति से वो जो चुनौतियां हैं आगे आने वाली जनरेशन्स को कम होगा या बढ़ेगा, ये एक मानना है। दूसरा, जो ये विचार आए हैं, तो इतनी अधिक हमने प्राइवेटाइजेशन स्कूल की देख ली है और स्कूल में ऐसा हो गया है। अभी अभी मैं एक सामान्य से एक मूवी का जिक्र करूंगी, परीक्षा नामक, प्रकाश झा द्वारा निर्मित है, जिसमें एक रिक्शे वाले का जो पुत्र होता है वो कहीं ना कहीं जो बन जाता है, लाइक उसको कितनी जद्दोजहद करनी पड़ती है एक अच्छी एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट में पाने की। तो क्या ऐसा क्या हुआ इतने वर्षों में कि शिक्षा मतलब लाइक for only good education is should only be for the elite class. Although अगर मैं प्री इंडिपेंडेंस की बात करूं तो हमने ये भी जाना है, मैं सिर्फ एक परिकल्पना रखना चाहूंगी, हमने ये भी देखा है कि जब उस वक्त बोस, जेसी बोस, सत्येंद्रनाथ बोस, तो उस वक्त जो उन्होंने एक अपने घर में ही लेबोरेटरी स्टार्ट करी थी, उस लेबोरेटरी का नाम था बोस विज्ञान मंदिर, जो आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस उसका नाम बदल के बोस इंस्टीट्यूट हो गया। तो वो मतलब हम इंडिपेंडेंट हुए और साथ में हम क्या कॉपी करते गए, ये मेरा मानना बिल्कुल सही है। हम एज ए रिसर्चर हमें बहुत आगे की ओर देखना चाहिए, लेकिन क्या पीछे इतना खराब था? जो कि पीसी रॉय जैसे महान वैज्ञानिक, जिन्होंने जिसको कहते हैं हिस्ट्री ऑफ हिंदू केमिस्ट्री की रचना की, वेयर दिस वर्ड हिंदू हैज नथिंग टू डू विद धर्मा, it is all the compilation work of the ancient chemistry that was there in the past tradition. So these were all there. So why I as a student, when I was a student in 85 86, when I was in a school system or in a college, why I was not allowed, why I was not given such kind of education. देन भाषा की बात करते हैं, पीसी रॉय मातृभाषा की बहुत पैरवी करते थे, क्योंकि जब हमारे, और शायद नई शिक्षा नीति में हमारे वीसी सर इसको और अच्छे से एक्सप्लेन करेंगे कि भाषा और जो शुरुआती दौर में होता है, हम बच्चों को अंग्रेजी भाषा या जो भी दूसरी भाषा है उस पर ज्यादा जोर देते हैं वनस्पत जो मातृभाषा है। तो जो शुरुआती दौर में बच्चा सिर्फ इस बात पे रह जाता है कि उसको भाषा का अध्ययन करना है, रेदर देन कि उसमें कुछ इनिशिएटिव स्किल्स आए। तीसरी बात, रॉट आयरन, अंग्रेजों के जमाने में जो हमारे यहाँ पद्धति थी आयरन की, वो आयरन इतना खरा था कि उसका टेक्नोलॉजी बाहर ले जाके फिर यहाँ बेचा गया, और बेचने वाले का जो स्किल था वो मतलब उतना अच्छा नहीं था जो यहाँ की आयरन की स्किल है, और धीरे धीरे हमारे यहाँ की जो इंडस्ट्रीज बंद होती गई। तो ये नई शिक्षा नीति का सीधा सीधा जोर आत्मनिर्भरता पे भी है, और हम एजुकेटर्स का एक सीधे सीधे तौर पे दायित्व है कि हम इसको कैसे आगे ले जाएं। वैसे हमारा बहुत समय निकल गया है, पर फिर भी हम एज ए एजुकेटर्स अपनी शिक्षा को प्रदान कर सकते हैं। आज की डेट में कहें कि अब कोरोना काल ही आया है तो हम सब ऑनलाइन माध्यम में शिक्षा ले रहे हैं, आज वेबिनार मीटिंग कर रहे हैं और चर्चा कर रहे हैं। तीसरी मैं एकदम अंतिम बात कहूंगी कि पीसी रॉय साथ में इतने बड़े स्वतंत्रता संग्राम के धनिक थे और कहते थे कि सेल्फ रिलायंट भारत, उस वक्त उनकी सोच थी सेल्फ रिलायंट भारत। इस सोच के साथ उन्होंने बंगाल केमिकल्स का निर्माण किया जो आज भी चलित है। तो इन सब माध्यमों को क्यों नहीं आगे मतलब आगे बढ़ाया जा, यानी कहने की बात है कि भारत की अवधारणाएं इतनी भी बुरी नहीं थी कि जिनको बढ़ावा दिया जाए। ठीक है, कम ही सही, देर से ही सही, लेकिन उसको अवश्य बढ़ाना चाहिए। बस मैं इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ अपनी जो एक इंट्रोडक्टरी रिमार्क है उसको यहीं पे मैं, बाकी चर्चा में हम आगे लेंगे। साथ में मैं इनवाइट करूंगी प्रोफेसर दीपक गौर जी को, जो कि हम सबको एक फॉर्मल इनवाइट वेलकम करेंगे। Okay, let me introduce to all of you. Professor Deepak Gaur is a scientist and professor at School of Biotechnology of Jawaharlal Nehru University. He is known for his research studies on malaria, parasite biology, and vaccine development. He is highly recognized nationally and internationally in the scientific fraternity. He is the recipient of several awards, including the prestigious 2017 Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize Award, the biggest award we see in the scientific fraternity. He is also serving as a director of admissions at JNU, while he has been a member of our governing body since 2019. He has recently appointed as a chairman governing body of our college. Over to you, Professor Gaur.
Thank you, Dr. Robi, for that kind introduction. But today it's a double delight for me because I have the great privilege of inviting not our keynote speaker for today, who is a person who I have had the privilege of working very closely and learning a lot from. That is Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you, sir, for sparing the time to talk to our students and tell them more about the National Education Policy. Friends, while Dr. Ruby will be introducing Professor Jagdish Kumar, and you will get to know a lot about his academic achievements and background, but since I've had the privilege of working very closely with him as part of the JNU team, let me give you a different facet, which probably a person in my capacity can actually share with you. You see, he's a great noted academician. We have seen at Jawaharlal Nehru University a great administrator as well. And let me give you some facets or examples of that. Today, we are facing one of the biggest challenge in human history. That is probably after 100 years, after the Spanish flu of 1918, in 2019, and now we are facing the corona pandemic. And it is a situation where today we are unable to meet in person. And this webinar is a great example of this. But all this is possible because of online transformation and embracing technology. And in this regard, Professor Jagdish Kumar has been a true visionary. I mean, let me start off with when he's been the proponent of embracing technology. I remember when our first interaction with him, he said, Deepak, why are your school not taking videos of your lectures so that they can be shared not only with the students in the university, but also can be taken advantage of by outside students. And today that has become so much more important in these times that we live in, where it is becoming very difficult because of safety and health hazards that we are unable to meet. But technology is basically the life savior here. And great example is this current seminar, as well as online teaching that is taking place. And it is under his true leadership that this transformation has come. It is under his leadership that JNU was one of the first universities to embrace the computer-based test for entrance examination. And this is where I have closely worked with him. This is something that IITs had started first, and Professor Jagdish Kumar has been chairman of the JEE committees, GATE committees, where this all online examination process has been conducted. So it was such a great benefit for JNU to have such a leader who was pushing online as well as technological advancements in our university. And that is today paying off in such a big way, where today all the courses are being taught online in our different programs across different schools. Examinations are being taken online, something which was thought very not possible some few years back. Today, this is happening with the great rigor and robustness, and it is because of champions like Professor Jagdish Kumar. And this is today he'll be speaking about the national new educational policy, which is a transformative policy which is going to affect so many millions of students' lives and actually for the better. And it is here that we need, while the policy has been framed, we need this to be implemented and championed by very, very noted academicians like Professor Jagdish Kumar. And in this regard, sir, I'm extremely grateful on behalf of the college that you spared the time, and we are looking forward to hearing your, and without any further ado, I once again welcome you, sir, on behalf of the college. Thank you so much for sparing the time, your valuable time. We all know how busy you are. And thank you again, once again. And over to you, Dr. Ruby. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Gaur. So just a brief introduction about Professor Jagdish Kumar. He is a noted academician, administrator, and author who is currently working as a Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and a professor in Department of Electrical Engineering at IIT Delhi. He took over as VC of JNU from Sudhir Kumar in January 2016. And best part is he did his master's and PhD in electrical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. Even my some of the school education was in Madras. Okay, he works in the area of nanoscience and nanotechnology. He has authored many books like Fundamentals of Tunnel Field Effect Transistor, CRC Press, Tunnel Field Effect Transistor, Modeling and Stimulation. He has been awarded 29th IETE Ramlal Wadhwa Gold Medal for distinguished contribution in field of semiconductor device design and modeling. And he was the organizing chairman for Joint Management Entrance Test GMET 2011. He was chairman of GATE 2011 and vice chairman of GATE 2010 at IIT Delhi. So before I formally give away the mic to Professor Jagdish Kumar, मैं just कुछ पंक्तियां जो शिक्षा नीति पे ही है उनको मैं कहूँगी पढ़ना चाहूँगी. दीवाने गालिब पढ़ो महावीर यूं आप, उर्दू अरबी फारसी हिंदी करे मिलाप, शिक्षा दीक्षा ताक पर रखता रोज गरीब, बचपन बेगारी करे फूटे हाय नसीब, पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी गई हर एक सच्ची बात, अक्षर अक्षर ज्ञान है खुशियों की सौगात. शिक्षा एक समान हो, शिक्षा एक समान हो, एक बनेगा भारत, फैला दो सर्वत्र ही पावन यह संदेश, जिसमें जितना ज्ञान है उतना उसका तेज, महावीर फिर ज्ञान से करता क्यों परहेज, विद्या में हर शक्ति है हर मुश्किल का तोड़, पुस्तक से मत मुख मोड़ शब्द बड़े बेजोड़, अक्षर से कर मित्रता सच्ची मित्र किताब, तेरे सभी सवाल का इसके पास जवाब, सारी भाषा बोलियां विद्या का है रूप, विश्व में चहु और ही खिली ज्ञान की धूप, जीवन ही अर्पित किया माँ सरस्वती के नाम, उस साधक को यह जगत झुककर करे प्रणाम, पढ़ा लिखा इंसान ही लिखता है तकदीर, अनपढ़ सदा दुखी रहता कहे कभी महावीर. This is a writing from some unknown poet, Mahavir. Okay. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Jagdish.
Thank you, Dr. Ruby, Professor Deepak Gaur, all the faculty of the college, and the students who have joined this webinar. We are meeting through a digital medium. When we are using technology, it is quite possible that there could be disruptions because of some network failure. If you notice that my network is weak, you please let me know, then I can change you to another network so that our program continues without any disruption. Today we have met here to discuss about the national education policy. But before I get into the points in national education policy, I would like to first bring to your notice a couple of points. And as part of what I'm going to discuss, I will also tell you a couple of short stories to emphasize the importance of the issues that I'm going to put before you. All of us know that India is the longest surviving civilization in the world. And for times immemorial, all over the world, people have been attracted to India. They were mesmerized by the civilizational developments in India, the cultural and philosophical aspects of India. Now, if you look at what people thought about India as early as in 21st century, um, Bill Gates, when he visited India, he said, in America, there is a lot of technology. It is a technologically advanced country, but they do not really know how to solve the problems of people. And he said there are other countries where there are a lot of poor people, but they do not have the technological solutions to take away their misery. But about India, he said, India has an interesting position. It has both a deep understanding of the challenges of its society, and it has a great capacity to help solve these problems. That is what people think about India. And if you go a little bit back in 20th century, for example, all of you heard about Schrödinger, who is supposed to be the originator of the quantum physics. So talking about India, he said, after the conversations about Indian philosophy, some of the ideas of quantum physics that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. So he actually linked the Indian philosophical aspects to the quantum physics, because quantum physics is a subject which is very difficult to understand. Often we understand science through analogies or metaphors and examples. But in quantum physics, you cannot give real life examples so that you can understand easily. You only have to use philosophical approaches to understand quantum physics. And he also said, Schrödinger said, some blood transfusion from the East to the West is required to save the Western sciences from spiritual anemia. Now, this is what Schrödinger thought just in the last century. Now, you can go back and talk about so many visitors who came to India and spoke so many great things about India. So why is that India has remained such a country, India has remained such a society that the whole world looks to it in order to find solace and peace, and also to find solutions to the problems that human societies are facing? To my mind, it appears that there are certain aspects in our Indian society, in our Indian culture, in our Indian ethos, which make this possible. And that is the reason why the national education policy emphasizes on building our education on Indian ethos, on Indian civilization, Indian culture. Now, what exactly is it? Why are we talking about this foundational base for our education? Let me tell you a couple of things which will make it clear. The first thing, in India, for times immemorial, we always emphasized on improving the quality of life. Not unlike today what we do, improving the standard of living. We of course have to use technological innovations, scientific discoveries in order to improve the quality of the standard of living. Nobody is against creating wealth, but our emphasis should be more on improving the quality of life. And that is what we have done in India. When I was a student at IIT Madras, we used to have extramural lectures every Wednesday. We used to invite a famous, a well-known person, a great scientist or a great spiritual leader to come and talk to these students. And we used to learn a lot from there. So when I'm talking about the quality of life, I just remembered a story told by the head of the Ramakrishna Mission, Swami Ranganathananda. He is no more now. He came to IIT Madras to give a lecture, and as part of that lecture, he told us what is the meaning of quality of life. So let me tell you this small story. This story is about a fisherman, a very elderly fisherman. He used to catch few fish every day. sell them and use that money to feed his family and himself. And the rest of the day, he used to play merrily with his grandchildren on the beach. And one day, there was a very rich elderly person who came to the beach with his grandchild. And he went around and in the beach, he played with his grandchild. And then while going back, he noticed this elderly fisherman just lying there, laughing, playing with his grandchildren. So he goes there and tells this elderly fisherman, uh, I'm a businessman. I would like to give you a small idea, if you don't mind. The fisherman says, please go ahead. You see, you are catching few fish every day, and then the rest of the day you are simply wasting. Why don't you catch more fish so that you get more money, and you can use that money to employ more people, and then you can earn more money. And using that money, you can buy some boats, machine boats, go and catch more fish, employ more people, and then you can build your business. And one day you will become so rich, you can buy an expensive car and come with your grandchildren to play around here. So this elderly person says, you see, what do you think I am doing? I'm precisely doing the same thing that you are saying, that I'm enjoying with my grandchildren throughout the day at the beach. That is the meaning of quality of life. The quality of life, the happiness that we derive is in the mind. And that is what in India for thousands of years we emphasized, that you need to cut down your needs. And if you want to lead a happy life, you need to focus on improving the quality of your life. Now, the second thing that you see about India is that India always emphasized on spiritual development over material security. As I said in the beginning, that there is nothing wrong in creating wealth, in acquiring material comforts for yourself. But parallelly, we should keep focusing on spiritual development. So what is the meaning of spiritual development? How does it help us? When you are spiritually aware, you feel a sense of abundance in your mind. When you feel a sense of abundance, you will not feel jealous about others. You will not feel unhappy if others are achieving something more than you are achieving. So you will have a sense of sharing with each other, right? Which is very, very essential for building a happy society. So spiritual development is another very, very important thing that India always focused. Let me tell you one small story that was told to me by my mother long, long ago. You know, there was in a forest, there was a saint, and he had his disciples. The saint had a hut, and the disciples were living in the surrounding area in their huts. One day it was lunch time, and the saint was getting ready to have his lunch inside the hut. And the disciples were there in front of his hut, sitting under the trees and talking to each other. And suddenly they watched a dog, a hungry dog, entering the saint's hut. After a few seconds, the dog came rushing out of the hut with a mouthful of food, maybe some rotis or chapatis in its mouth, and it started running away from the guru's hut. Before the disciples realized what was happening, the guru himself was running out of the hut. He was completely unhappy, and he was very, very displeased, and he was running after the dog. He was chasing the dog. And the disciples were surprised. What is happening? Why our guru was running after this dog? After a few minutes, the guru returned back, and he was coming to the hut. When the disciples looked at him, he was very pleasant. He was very relaxed. The disciples asked him, Guru, what happened? A moment ago, you were so unhappy. You were so angry. Now you feel relaxed. You feel happy. The disciples were thinking that the guru chased this dog. He might have beaten up the dog, or he did something. Then the guru says, You see, when I was about to eat, this hungry dog came in and it caught hold of my food and it ran away. But in that hurry, it forgot to take the butter block which was there next to the rotis. So therefore, I took the butter and I ran after the dog to give the butter also so that it can eat happily. No, this is what is the sense of sharing which gives us happiness. And this kind of happiness can come not because we are materially secure. It can come only if we spiritually evolve as individuals and as a society. So this is the second thing that India has always emphasized. And what about the relational care to each other? You know, today there is mindless competition. There is so much of rush. We have absolutely no time for others. We absolutely don't care about others. But in India, we always emphasized on relational care for each other. Our family system is a great example of this relational care. You have grandparents, you have parents, you have children, everybody living at the same place, taking care of each other, whether it is emotional needs, whether it is social needs or other needs, sharing with each other. So our family system is one of the best examples of this relational care. But I would like to give one story from Ramayana, emphasizing the need for relational care. In Ramayana, of course, there are so many important characters. You have Rama, you have Sita, Hanuman, Lakshman, and so many other characters are there, Ravan, Vibhishan, and so on. But we rarely think about Urmila. Urmila is the wife of Lakshman. Now, let me tell you how relational care can be learned from Urmila's story. When Rama was ordered to leave Ayodhya, and when he had to go and spend 14 years in the forest, Sita also wanted to accompany her. So Lakshmana, although Rama said, "You don't come," Lakshmana said, "No, I will accompany you. I want to protect you 24/7. Every second I want to protect you and Sita." But then Urmila also wanted to come. Lakshmana says, "Please don't come, you stay back. If you come, then I also have to divert my attention to you. I also have to take care of you, whereas I want to give my full attention to protecting Rama and Sita." But then how will Lakshmana protect Rama and Sita 24/7 every second? He may fall asleep. So Lakshmana goes to goddess Nindra, who is a goddess of sleep. And he asks, "Please give me a bone so that in the next 14 years, while I am protecting Rama and Sita, I will never fall asleep." Goddess Nindra says, "Yes, it's a noble thing that you are planning to do. I will give that bone, but then your sleep has to be taken over by somebody else. If that person sleeps for next 14 years, then you can remain awake and you can protect Rama and Sita." So Lakshmana goes and asks Urmila, "Can you sleep in my place for the next 14 years so that I can protect Rama and Sita?" And Urmila agrees. And she sleeps for the next 14 years until Rama comes back and until the coronation takes place, Urmila sleeps. So I wanted to narrate this small story to see how people go to what extent to care for each other. And that is what Indian culture, Indian ethos have taught us. The other important thing why the entire world looks to us is our emphasis on protecting the environment. The Indian philosophy always said that we need to lead a harmonious living, a harmonious life with both living and non-living beings, right? This brings to my mind a small story from Mahabharata. We talk about environmental protection, climate change, and all those issues now in 21st century. But even in Mahabharata times, the sense of protecting the environment was very much there. When the Pandavas were living in the forest, one day when the four Pandava brothers were going out of the hut into the forest to get food and other fuel for cooking food, Dharmaraja calls them and he asks them that when you go into the forest, you don't cut any more trees than required for our needs, for our immediate needs. You don't kill any more animals than that is required for our food, for our immediate need. You see, this kind of moderation, this kind of cutting down our needs so that the environment is protected. This thinking process that we are part of nature, and only when we protect nature, it protects us. This thinking has been there for centuries and centuries in India. And this is another reason why you see the entire world looks to us. One of the biggest assets of India is the nurturing of diversity in our country. The respect to the diversity that exists in India, the respect that we give for thousands and thousands of years. India has welcomed people from far off lands. They settled down here, they mingled with us. We have so many languages, we have so many festivals, we have so many colorful dresses. You see, there is so much of diversity, and we always nurture this diversity. On one hand, you have people who put a stone and some kumkum under a tree and worship that as a god. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have these half-naked fakirs, you have these half-naked sages who go and live in the coldest of the Himalayas and contemplate about the origins of the origins of universe and the purpose of life, the purpose of existence. So the entire spectrum can coexist in our country. It is because that we never try to dominate over each other. We always respected this cultural diversity. And the another biggest asset that our Indian culture has, our Indian ethos promote, is the social inclusivity, irrespective of from which part, which cross section of the society one comes from. For thousands of years in India, we mutually respected each other. We ensured that we together grow as a society. We heard of Valmiki, who was a wanderer, who was a dacoit, but the epic written by him, we respect it. We respect Valmiki. And there are numerous such examples of whoever that person may be, from whichever cross section that person has come, what he has done, what he has written, they have become our role models in our country. It is only because we emphasized on social inclusivity than dominating over each other. Now, the reason why we need to look at some of these aspects is that somewhere, either because of hundreds of years of dominance by foreign rulers, because of some of the things that happened during the rules of the colonial powers, somewhere we have lost touch with some of these Indian ethos. It is very, very important that we look back, we recognize those strong points of our Indian civilization, Indian culture, and build our future on this strong foundation. If India has survived as the longest surviving civilization, it is only because our base is very, very strong. You have seen the Greek culture, you have seen the Egyptian culture, you have seen so many other cultures which survived for hundreds of years, but then there is no trace of them on earth here now, today. But India continues. India was there yesterday, India is there today, and India will continue tomorrow. And that is possible only when we look back at our Indian ethos. And that is what the national education policy emphasizes on. So having said that, there are several things that people have discussed about national education policy. A number of webinars are being conducted on national education policy. That the national education policy is very, very inclusive. It emphasizes on a very holistic approach towards education, that it emphasizes on flexible, multidisciplinary approach to education, that if this national education policy is effectively implemented, the hope is that our educational system will be completely transformed so that we will become a knowledge society, so that we will become a strong nation in terms of developing technologies, in terms of becoming a hub of the supply chain of the goods and services and the good things of what India has given for centuries and centuries to the rest of the world. So instead of getting into so many aspects, so many good things that the national education policy has, I would like to emphasize on 2 points. And it occurred to me that I should emphasize on these two because Dr. Ruby mentioned during her introductory remarks about the importance of the mother tongue. I'm very, very glad that the national education policy emphasizes on the importance of imparting the early childhood education in the mother tongue of the child. I would like to spend few minutes discussing some of the ideas about the mother tongue, because there are some people who think that uh, teaching our kids in English medium is the best way. Teaching the students in mother tongue will actually deprive them of the economic opportunities for their growth. This is where I would like to bring some points in front of you so that we understand correctly, both from scientific point of view and also from social perspective, why it is important to introduce mother tongue in the early education of the child's life. Now, let me look at a couple of aspects. When we talk about mother tongue, what is mother tongue is a question that experts have asked. The generally accepted definition of mother tongue, of course, is that it is a language that the child acquires, not the child learns. Learning is different from acquiring. It is the first language that the child acquires from her parents or from people with whom the child is interacting, and also the language of the locality where the school is located or the house is located. And that is how the meaning of mother tongue is understood. And therefore, the national education policy very correctly states that wherever possible, the medium of instruction until grade 5, but preferably until grade 8 and beyond, will be, and it says, please note this, will be the home language or the local language and the regional language. Right. Deepak, can I continue?
Yes, sir. Please. I request everybody to mute themselves, please. Thank you.
Please continue, sir.
Okay. So the national education policy very rightly says that mother tongue is not just one language. It could be mother tongue that the child learns at home, or it could be the language that the child learns in the playground in the locality where the school is located. And particularly, I would like to say a couple of things about this mother tongue, because some people are trying to make it as if it is a very disadvantageous thing to introduce mother tongue in the educational system. Now, we need to remember that at a global level, India is signatory to the UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goals plan. And this Sustainable Development Goals very clearly, and India has adopted it in 2015. These goals in Target 4, the Sustainable Development Goals, they seek to ensure inclusive, equitable, and quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for everybody by 2030. It is a very, very good goal in front of you. It's a very good ideal in front of you. But however, how are we going to achieve that goal? The National Education Policy also says that these goals cannot be achieved unless our entire educational system is reconfigured to support and foster lifelong learning. But the use of English as a language of instruction is not a recent phenomena in the last 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. It goes back to our colonial past. This is best illustrated when I mention about the colonial past. We need to see how the colonial rulers have tried to impose English language as a language of instruction in India, neglecting the vernacular languages, neglecting the rich heritage of Indian languages. There was a director in East India Company in 200 years ago. He said, Charles Grant, the name of this director is Charles Grant from East India Company. 200 years ago, he said, the Hindus would in time become teachers of English themselves. And the employment of our language, that is English, in public business, for which every political reason remains in full force, would in the course of another generation make it very general throughout the country. That why some people are opposing introduction of the mother tongue in the place of English comes from this colonial mindset. In fact, the colonial masters also had great contempt towards the rich Indian language culture in India. The Indian languages, there are more than 1,000 of them. They are very rich in terms of language and literature. But the contempt shown by the colonial masters is best illustrated if you hear what Macaulay said in British Parliament in 1835. He said, who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia? We had the literary traditions right from Vedas to present day. India has produced such rich literature, be it epics, be it philosophy, be it sciences, technology, medicine, mathematics. But Macaulay has the audacity to say that a single European library is more than the entire Indian literature. On another occasion, Macaulay said that introduction of English among Indian masses has the potential to produce a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in tastes, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. And that is what Macaulay has achieved. Today, when we see that we are not against English, we would like to learn English. Even the national education policy says that we should learn English as a second language. English is required. Nobody undermines the importance of English. But however, when you look from the science point of view, when you look from the social perspective point of view, it is not English, but it is the mother tongue which plays a significant role. Now, look at how some of our own people emphasized and recognized the importance of the mother tongue, but in independent India, we hardly paid any attention to such feelings and opinions expressed by some of our own great people. When we lament often that why we have become imitators of Western intellectual and scientific approaches rather than be original innovators and knowledge creators. We often follow Western models of development, Western models of scientific discovery and innovation. We have ceased to be our own innovators, our own creators of knowledge. Why has this happened? Often we lament during intellectual discourses, in debates and discussions. Well, there could be other reasons, but one of the reasons that we must focus is that if our excessive dependence by generations of teachers and students on English as a language of instruction in colleges and universities, if this has led to this undesirable situation, is something that all of us have to examine. And there is a reason for that. It is not that we are feeling only now that we have simply become imitators. This was felt long ago, nearly 100 years ago, by Mahatma Gandhi. While writing in 1921, exactly 99 years ago, in Young India, Mahatma Gandhi said, the foreign medium, he is referring to the English language, the foreign medium has caused brain fag, put undue strain upon the nerves of our children, made them crammers and imitators, unfitted them for original work and thought, and disabled them for filtrating their learning to the family or the masses. The foreign medium, that is the English language, has made our children practically foreigners in their own land. He meant that we got completely disconnected with our own Indian culture, with our own Indian civilization. We have become simple imitators and followers. He further said, it is the greatest tragedy of the existing system. You see, that is what the national education policy tries to undo. That is what the national educational policy wants to achieve, the dreams of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi said, come what may, don't think of removing English and introducing mother tongue in a gradual manner. Don't think about non-availability of the textbooks in vernacular languages. You go ahead and introduce mother tongue. The books will follow, the literature will follow. In 1 year, you introduce mother tongue across India, in colleges and in universities, in towns and villages, everywhere. You emphasize on mother tongue, and you will see the kind of the transition that will happen in the minds of Indians. That is what Mahatma Gandhi wanted. When we are celebrating the 150th year of Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, it is important that we recognize what Mahatma Gandhi has said. I said there are two aspects here. One is the scientific evidence about the need for mother tongue, introduction of mother tongue in early education. The other one is the social aspect. When Mahatma Gandhi is talking about the social aspect, the disconnect that is created by Indian educational system because of its overemphasis on the English medium of instruction, we are talking about the social aspects. Now, what about the scientific evidence? There is enormous scientific research evidence on the table to tell us that mother tongue is very, very essential in the early childhood education of the children. In UNESCO Courier, this is a document available on UNESCO Digital Library. Howard Brabin, he wrote an article where he explains an important, very interesting discovery by a professor from Tokyo University. This professor's name is Professor Tadanobu Tsunoda. He is a professor from the Medical and Dental University at Tokyo. He is an expert in brain research, and he studied the impact of Japanese language on the creativity, on the learning abilities of the Japanese kids for nearly about 15 years. And at the end of these 15 years, he generated solid research evidence to conclusively say what he found. He said in 1981 in a conference organized by UNESCO, this professor who is an expert in brain research, he said, I believe that mother tongue differentiates the way in which people receive, process, feel, and understand sounds from the external environment. He said, the mother tongue is closely related to the development of the emotional mechanism in the brain. Our emotional connect, our emotions are designed by our mother tongue. So you see, therefore, if we move away from our mother tongue and if we study only in a foreign language, be it in English or some other language, right from childhood, when we are in the process of connecting to our own people, our own land, our own locality, our own culture, you are completely disrupted from this process and you are a person who is emotionally disconnected from your own people, from your own society. And that is what Mahatma Gandhi is trying to tell us, that how the introduction of English language has affected the thinking process of Indians. Now, it is not that only there is scientific evidence. It is not that only social reformers and great personalities like Mahatma Gandhi have emphasized the importance of the mother tongue. There are international organizations such as the United Nations, of which we are a member, and majority of the countries in the world are a member. If you look at as far away as in 1953, UNESCO suggested that every effort should be made. Long ago it suggested, every effort should be made to provide education in mother tongue. And as recently as in 2016, UNESCO, as part of its global education monitoring report, it outlined that to be taught in a language other than one's own has a negative effect on learning. Now you see, it is not just only the social aspect, it is not just only the it is the scientific evidence, it is even the international bodies which work for the welfare of the entire world. They are seeing and they are emphasizing the importance of the mother tongue in our early education or even later. Although it is slightly disconnected, I recently found that if you look at the top 10 countries which have won the largest number of Nobel Prizes, starting from USA, UK, Germany, Netherlands, Japan, Austria, all these companies, France, their kids study in their mother tongue. I'm not saying that no, studying in mother tongue may have a link to winning Nobel Prize. It's a totally different domain, but I'm just putting an observation before you. When we lament about how is that Indians are not getting Nobel Prizes, perhaps this could be because, as Mahatma Gandhi has said, as research evidence shows that teaching in English medium right from childhood must have affected our creativity, our innovation, and it is time that we look into these aspects seriously. Now, there is a very well-known expert in languages and how it affects children's creativity. Professor Carol Benson, she has very recently published a few months ago in 2020, a very elaborate study on how mother tongue affects the children's creativity. She says very, very clearly that the more highly developed the first language skills, the better the results in the second language, because language and cognition in the second build on the first. So you see that all around people are saying that mother tongue is very, very important. I wanted to take a little bit time on this because I have seen that in the debates and the discussions in the articles that are being published in the media. I have not seen a detailed discussion on the importance of mother tongue. So therefore, I thought in front of you in this audience, I must bring out some of these important aspects of why it is important to introduce mother tongue. But of course, there are some people who have raised concerns about what about people who are transferred from one place to other place? What about people who migrate from one state to the other state? Of course, we need to worry about them. Because what they say is that what if my child studies up to 3rd standard in a local language of that region, and then the parents and the family moves to another region where the local language is different? How do I tackle this issue? Now, this is a genuine problem, definitely. But now, let us look at this migration issue. Across the country, if you see, less than 5% of Indians actually migrate across the states. The remaining 95% of Indians, they stay where they are. And this is a fact. And these less than 5% of the migrants who move from one place to the other place, they are of different categories. People move from rural places to rural places. You know, if somebody moves from Uttar Pradesh in Lucknow or surrounding places, if they move to Bhopal or surrounding villages there, they are moving from one Hindi speaking place to another Hindi speaking place. So they move from rural to rural. And then there are people who move from rural to urban. And there are people who move from urban to urban. Now, when this movement happens, of course, we need to find a solution. We need to allay their concerns. Number one, just because there are less than 5% of migrants within India, we cannot deprive the rest of 95% of Indian population the advantage of acquiring and becoming creative by studying in their own mother tongue. And two, just because there are only less than 5% of migrants across the state, we cannot keep away from the concerns of our own people who are migrating. And this is where I think there are two great opportunities for us. One, you can train language teachers in different languages. And that will, it has two important advantages. One, it will create large number of language teacher positions across the country. Two, when the teachers learn this language and they are imparting the education to the students in the local languages, the local languages are strengthened. Over a period of time, the literature and other aspects of that language itself will become stronger. So this is number one advantage, that you create a lot of job creation is there for the language teachers. And number two, you strengthen the local languages. There is a worry across India that some of our Indian languages are disappearing from usage. And it is such an important cultural heritage of our country. We must put every effort to protect these languages. Number one, if you train large number of teachers, perhaps they can be present across the country and take care of the local language needs for people who are migrating. The other one, what about technology? There are a lot of technological advances today where simple solutions are available for speech-to-speech conversion, text-to-speech conversion, text-to-text conversion. And these are inexpensive solutions which one can put on their smartphone. And when you are speaking in Tamil, I may understand it in Assamese language. Or if somebody is speaking in Kashmir language, I may understand it in Telugu. So there is a great opportunity for us here to come up with this language converters, simple applications. And there's a huge potential for the entrepreneurs to take up this language conversion. It is not an easy process. It is a difficult technological challenge, but then we have the ability and resilience to overcome those challenges and find solutions. Now, having spoken about the mother tongue issue for some time as part of this discussion. I also wanted to speak on mother tongue because I studied in Telugu medium until my 12th standard. And it had a huge impact on me because my father was a teacher in a small school. And I used to have a trunk full of books on various subjects, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Panchatantra, and local literature, poems, novels, etc. in Telugu language. And I used to be a bookworm and read all of them in Telugu language. And I believe that some of those ideas have actually shaped my attitude towards life, my attitude towards how I interact with people around me. So you see that mother tongue. And then when I shifted to university, because parallelly I was learning English as a second language in my school, although I was not a great knowledgeable person in English, when I switched over to English, the college, when I had to speak language, English language, I of course put some effort. And then sooner I became well conversant in English. I remember when I was at IIT Madras, even at that time I was not fully conversant in English. Sometimes my friends used to smile for the pronunciation of the words. Even now, some of the words I may not pronounce correctly. But soon I found that when my friends were writing their thesis, they used to give me the draft copy and say, Jagdish, you please read it because you have the that knack to correct all the phrases and sentences and catch the grammar. And I used to do that. So the point I am trying to make here is that just because you have studied in Telugu medium, it will not create any handicap to you when you move on to the higher education. The other one, of course, people say that what about the textbooks? What about the equivalent words for the technical words? Can technical education be imparted in the local languages? Again, you had to read what Mahatma Gandhi has written nearly 100 years ago, when technical education was not as it is today, so diverse today. Even in those days, Mahatma Gandhi emphasized that even if it is technical education, we should find ways to impart technical education in the local language. He gave an example of his visit to a village, and in that village, when he was talking with the villagers in their local language, there was a motor car in which I think Mahatma Gandhi went there, and one of the villagers he said, "No, Mahatma Gandhi." He of course said in his language, Mahatma Gandhi came here in Hawa Gadi. For motor vehicle, for motor car, instantaneously he said it is Hawa Gadi. So Mahatma Gandhi said, you have that kind of creativity to invent new words which are equivalent to the technical vocabulary that we so commonly use. So there is no doubt in my mind that the emphasis in national education policy on the introduction of mother tongue is a great move. As educationists, as teachers, as students, we should fully support this move. And hopefully in next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, when our students are educated in their local language, perhaps you will see a sea change in our attitude towards our own country, in our attitude and connectedness to our own society, in finding solutions to our problems. I'm sure there is going to be a transformational change. Now let me switch the gears. I think we have some more time here. I would love to actually take questions and answer, because typically when I give lectures, even in my own lecture hall, I don't give lectures for more than 50 minutes. And today I noticed that you have given me 1 hour. So I would like to conclude my talk a little earlier than 1 hour, because I enjoy questions from the students. And even in a regular lecture, what I do is after every 20 minutes or so, I completely change gears and then talk about something unconnected of the topic. so that the students feel relaxed, and then I bring them back into the subject, because you see, our human mind is designed, our attention span is only about 15-20 minutes. So if a long lecture is given, it is quite natural that our thoughts will go here and there, and you will keep checking your WhatsApp messages. Perhaps you will even be waiting to see when the lecture will be completed, right? So it's not your fault, and that's how our brains are designed. And that is the reason why, as a teacher in our classrooms, it is important that we engage with our students instead of giving very boring lectures and then write on the blackboard, and the students are simply taking down the notes. It has to be a two-way process, and that's why I'm saying I would love to take questions from you, short questions and short answers. But before I move to the question answer session, I would like to emphasize on a couple of points that came to me. One of the concerns raised by some critics and also the observers is about the implementation of the national education policy. So some people are saying that yes, the national education policy is outstanding. We must implement it, but then there are going to be problems. So how are we going to implement this policy? So this is what some of the critics are saying. So I thought about it a few days ago, last week. Why is that there is so much of concern about the implementation of the national education policy? And why is that some people are thinking that, like many other policies during last 70 years, this policy also may not see the light of the day. But I would like to counter some of those arguments and say that this national education policy has many good aspects, which makes it very, very possible, very, very possible for implementation. And why? Let me take up a couple of points and let me emphasize, let me explain why the national education policy is an implementable policy, and I'm very sure that it will be implemented or in phases, and we will start seeing the results in next 10 or 20 years. So why do I think that the national education policy is implementable? First of all, before I delve into some of these issues, what are those ingredients that national education policy has, which makes it a highly implementable policy? Let me identify 3 important points in the national education policy. One important thing that I see is that the national education policy very clearly it tells us, unmistakably, it tells us the goals as well as the problems. The problems and the goals in our education system are very well elucidated in the national education policy. The second one is when the national education policy is formulated, the formulation is based on evidence-based data, which is a very strong point for any policy. And the third most important aspect of the national education policy that I see is that it is fully backed by the stakeholders coming from wide-ranging cross-sections of the society. But having said that, since the national education policy is multifaceted and it is multi-leveled, we need to see what other factors in the national education policy make it an implementable policy. Not just the national education policy, any policy has a chance of failure because of several pitfalls. One of the important pitfall that any policy may have, and therefore it may fail, is the lack of communication with the stakeholders. If the stakeholders do not understand what this policy is going to offer and how it is going to transform their lives, that is the first pitfall of any policy. This requires, if the stakeholders have to understand, there has to be an effective communication between the framers of the national education policy and the stakeholders. But fortunately, it is so pleasantly surprising that the framers of the national education policy had wide-ranging, large-scale consultations with the stakeholders. You will be surprised to see the scale at which these consultations are held. You know, people in hundreds of districts were consulted, thousands of blocks, and lakhs of panchayats were consulted. The draft policy was translated into 22 vernacular languages so that people can understand it in their local language. So there is a wide range consultation process, and the feedback and suggestions were received, and they are effectively discussed and incorporated in the national education policy. So right from the beginning, the day the national education policy was announced by the government, since that day, I have been, whenever I met the media, I have been emphasizing the fact that this national education policy is an outcome of a truly bottom-up democratic process. So therefore, and that is the reason why the stakeholders think that it is their policy. And this is where the second issue comes. Many policies fail because the stakeholders do not feel that ownership of the policy. But fortunately, as this webinar shows, we are discussing about the national education policy. There have been wide-ranging webinars and discussions after the national education policy was announced. And so many people are actively and positively discussing about the national education policy, indicating the sense of ownership that the stakeholders feel about this national education policy. And when you feel that sense of ownership, that also leads to a sense of responsibility, which is very, very important for the implementation of the national education policy. The third most important point why policies fail is because there are conflicting goals in the policy, and there is a complete disconnect with the previous policies. We all understand that the new national education policy is a major departure from the previous education policies. But however, what we see is that the new education policy very effectively addresses the most critical limitations and the fault lines of the earlier education policies. Although it is distinctly different and it's a major departure from the previous policies in terms of addressing the fault lines, there is a visible continuity in terms of realizing universal access to quality education to enable the Indian citizens to make India a developed country and a major economy in the world. And this innate continuity built into the new education policy is going to make this policy a very, very implementable national education policy. Often, we also see that the policies fail because we don't set the priorities right. We don't enumerate the right priorities. And this is another major block that can come in the way of the implementation of the national education policy. Now, when you talk about the NEP, there are two major players. One, of course, is the Ministry of Education at the center, and the other is the stakeholders, which includes all the state governments, the school boards, the schools, the academic institutions, and the universities. The Ministry of Education, of course, will play a pivotal role in the implementation of the national education policy from the point of providing a direction, funding, governance, regulation, and of course, the review, time-to-time review. But what is important is both the key players, the stakeholders and the Ministry of Education, they had to set the priorities right. And these priorities had to be decided based on both the short-term and long-term needs of the educational institutes, the funding requirements, and the realistic deadlines which can be realized within the given time goals. One thing that we need to understand, some people say, where are the funds for the implementation of the national education policy. Please keep in your mind that many of the suggestions, many of the directions that are given in the national education policy, they do not really require funds. They actually require attitudinal change among the educators, among the educational institutes. We simply have to adapt effective teaching learning processes, and we need to bring changes in our academic and administrative processes in order to adopt some of the good things that are in the national education policy. Institutes have ample autonomy even before national education policy is announced. And with the introduction of the national education policy, there is enough autonomy for the educational institutes to bring a lot of changes without waiting for somebody to nudge you, without waiting for somebody to force you to introduce some of these great changes that we contemplate on bringing into our educational system. A couple of things I would like to divert from here. A couple of things that I would like to inform you. When I said we don't require funds to introduce some useful changes in our education system, I would like to give a couple of examples from my own university. You know, there is a great emphasis on the indigenous knowledge systems in the national education policy. 2 years ago, we started working, even before the NEP was announced. We started working on introducing indigenous knowledge systems as part of our research and academic activities in the university. From this coming semester, we are offering a 5-year BSc, MSc integrated program in Ayurveda biology. You know, this is a fantastic combination. Ayurveda is our indigenous knowledge system, and biology is the modern system. And if we bring these two together, you see the kind of innovation, the kind of new knowledge that can be created. But mind you, this requires expertise across the schools. And most of our indigenous knowledge systems are also, you know, they are stored and transferred from generation to generation in Sanskrit language. Therefore, some knowledge of Sanskrit language is also important. And there is a great emphasis in NEP on the study of Sanskrit, on using Sanskrit to study our Indian literature. There is a great emphasis. So that is why when we started this integrated BSc MSc program, we brought together School of Sanskrit and Indic Studies, School of Life Sciences, School of Biotechnology, School of Computational Sciences for Computational Linguistics. You see, there are so many things that we can do in the university without anybody nudging you, asking you to do certain things. So now, you see, coming back to why certain policies fail, policies also fail because there is no direct, the clear chain of command for the implementation. And then often there is also duplication of efforts, such as we see, we have so many funding agencies in our country. You have DST, you have DBT, you have CSR, you have UGC, and you have so many other ministries which are funding. And sometimes when I sit in these project approval, project funding committees for selection of projects, I see that people are submitting the same projects in different places. There is so much of duplication of effort. And in this direction, the national education policy has taken a very, very right decision in deciding to form the National Research Foundation, so that there is a coordinated, a directed effort in terms of creating that ecosystem in the educational institutes across the country. Please remember, when we talk about innovations and entrepreneurship, please do not think only about a few institutes such as IITs or few central universities. The rest of India lives and works in those hundreds of universities. Unless the general standard of research and academics in these universities is raised above certain threshold value, we as a country will not be able to progress. We must emphasize and ensure that the research ecosystem is improved in all these institutes. And that is one of the goals of the National Research Fund that is being created as part of this national education policy. So I have few more minutes before I conclude. I would like to emphasize one more issue why policies fail. The policies fail because of the lack of leadership. You know, people who are tasked to implement this national education policy should be people who are technically savvy, who are open-minded, who are committed and decisive. Leadership here plays a paramount role because these leaders who are planning to implement, who are in the process of implementing this national education policy, they should be good team players, and more than being good players, they should be good risk takers. And these leaders, of course, have to be self-driven with enthusiasm and with high integrity. If such people are not part of this implementation, it is definitely a recipe for failure. You see, there is one important thing, it is called the support mechanism in the policy itself. The support mechanisms have to be built into the policy if you want to effectively implement it. And there are several support mechanisms already incorporated in NEP. I would like to mention one as an example. And this is the idea of the establishment of the Higher Education Commission of India. This is a wonderful support mechanism which is part of the NEP, which has 4 verticals to look after very distinct functions: regulation, accreditation, funding, and the academic standard setting. And there are a number of such support mechanisms which are built into the national education policy. Therefore, I am very, very optimistic that if right kind of leadership is there and right kind of priorities are set, we are bound to implement this national education policy very, very successfully. And that is bound to revolutionize, reform our educational system completely. Recently, I was attending a webinar, a conclave on transformational reforms in higher education under national education policy. And this was held on 7th August 2020, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended. And he said, to implement the national education policy, we all have to work together determinedly. A new round of dialogue and coordination with universities, colleges, school education boards, different states and different stakeholders is about to start from here. I couldn't agree more to what Prime Minister has said. A mammoth task as big as implementing the national education policy across our the great country such as India can indeed be realized only through an effective collaboration between central and state level institutions. And there are, of course, several things in the national education policy. We will be spending days to discuss about them, but we need to be looking at the future as students, as teachers, as educationists. Let us be ready. Let us gear ourselves to implement this national education policy, and let us transform the lives of our students so that they become good citizens and help in the growth of our country. Before I conclude, I would like to say a couple of sentences, a couple of verses which are in simple Sanskrit. Manasa satatam smaraniyam, vachasa satatam vadaniyam, lokahitam mama karaniyam. That is the objective of education, to work for the welfare of the society. So with those comments, I would like to stop here and please take over.
Thank you very much, sir. Mansa Vacha Karmana. So starting from Schrodinger, quantum physics, and then taking us to Ramayana Kal and inspiring us about the moral education which we had already had in our these texts Then talking about the National Research Foundation, so that we can have a original research and which can have a originality here. A lot of questions are there and very interesting questions being asked. Let me share one thing, sir, that is, apart from educators, even the common people or those who are in some corporate world, they have welcomed this national education policy. And here the students mostly they have joined as a NSS volunteers along with our faculties, and they will act as like brand ambassador to take this thing to the society as a whole. And we are even having a feedback form that will directly go to the ministry. Yes. So we have as a moderator, Dr. Abhishek Pratap Singh, who will take up the questions from chat box, and Dr. Varsha Vaveja, she will take up a few of the interesting questions from a Facebook live session. So over to you, Abhishek ji.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. A very good evening to you, sir, and all the distinguished panelists. I think my video is not working. Maybe there's some problem. So for a very engaging and thoughtful discussion, beginning from quantum physics to National Research Foundation. Now, constantly as you were speaking, the students and the faculty and other participants were raising the questions. So I have made a list of questions, and they relate to different topic on the mother tongue, on the technical education, on the research funding and other. So one of the questions that has been asked by student regarding the mother tongue is that he says that in terms of when we look into terms of social behavior and lifestyle, English seems to get a priority in the urban life. So if focus will the focus on mother tongue shall not lead to some kind of less expose to the modern system. And the other question is that on the language, why is it not feasible if we can, this question is from the SK Singh ji, that why is it not feasible if we can have learning in English and mother tongue from the very beginning? Vice Chancellor, sir.
Right. You see, there is a scientific evidence to show that when the child is learning about her surroundings, trying to understand the world around her, at the same time, if you are imposing another language, it is going to affect the learning capabilities and the creativity of the child. There is enough scientific evidence to prove that. So it is not hearsay. So that is the reason why we are emphasizing that the early childhood education should be in mother tongue, because the child can relate to what she is learning, because she has already acquired, she has a tool in her hand to understand the world around her. And this tool is acquired naturally through mother and other family members, right? So that is the reason why we want English to be learned as a second language at its later stage. Now, English, of course, is essential to be a global citizen, to be able to interact with people across the world. English is necessary, and nobody is saying you should not learn English. English can be learned as a second language, and if you look at some of the advanced countries such as Japan, Germany, France, even PhD theses are done in their own language. But Japan has the highest number of Nobel Prizes as compared to other Asian countries. So we should not feel inferior when we are not learning English at the early stage, when we are studying only in mother tongue. So that inferiority complex has actually come because of the colonial past, as I mentioned to you, that they had this long-term plan of implanting these kind of thinking in generations of Indians who will come in the future, and that's how they transformed. But as Mahatma Gandhi ji has said, if you emphasize on mother tongue, perhaps the change that we will see will come in next 10 or 20 years. And often I found in my own classrooms at IIT Delhi that some of the best students in my class, they have not come from English medium schools. In fact, they had difficulty answering a question in English during the discussions in the classroom. So I used to permit them, okay, you answer in Hindi. And they have done very well in their life. So never have this kind of feeling that if you learn English at a later stage, you will somehow be disadvantageous in a disadvantageous position. That is not true at all. And I have studied, as I mentioned to you, in Telugu medium until my 12th standard, and I have absolutely no problem in doing what I am doing now.
Okay, thank you, sir. The other two questions which I have clubbed. One question is how much National Education Policy 2020 focuses on the vocational education, and as we move towards the age of information and technology, does National Education Policy comes with some kind of more input in terms of science and technology, training and education? Your view, sir.
Right. You know, some of you might have heard about the International Solar Alliance. This was initiated by India in 2015 together with France. Now we have more than 100 countries which have solar radiation. They are partners in this. Now we also have a goal to generate close to about 100 gigawatts of electricity using this solar energy. Now, there is going to be a need for thousands of skilled workers who will maintain these solar panels, who are able to repair these solar systems. Now, if you don't focus on vocational training, who is going to do this job? And then, as individuals, we are all made differently. Somebody would like to become a poet, somebody would like to become a doctor, somebody would like to become something else in their life. And we must encourage all these, our inner interests that we have. We need to create an ecosystem where we develop on those inner interests. Now, vocational training is something that we have completely neglected, although there is going to be a great need for skilled workforce in India and all over the world. If you look at some of the advanced countries such as Germany, South Korea, a large number of their students, they don't go to the universities. They actually take up vocational training right from the beginning. And people who undergo this vocational training have equal opportunities as those who study in a university. They can lead a good life, a good standard of living, and then they can work in areas that they like and they admire. And this was completely lacking in our society. I think since the colonial times, English education means it's only becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And we have neglected vocational training to the complete detriment of the progress of our country. So there is a great emphasis in the national education policy on the vocational training. And also, you see, there is an emphasis on flexible education. While you are undergoing vocational training, it doesn't stop you to register for a course in Korean language, for example. You are a lover of international languages, you can always do that. So, or you are taking vocational training in welding, for example. Welding is very, very important. How do you know how these welders learn the welding skills? They don't go to a traditional school and then learn. They learn by joining as an apprentice in a welding shop, or they learn from their father or brother. There is no proper training for the welders as an example, as a profession. If we can have vocational training and train them as good welders with a lot of infrastructural developments, progress that is happening in India, there is going to be a huge demand for welders. So I can give you a large number of such professions where we need to train our people. And this is where I have been telling for the last 5-6 years or so, whenever I meet education, is that the great educational institutes such as IITs and JNU and other universities, good universities, they should not keep away from vocational training. They should also have units where, based on their own research capabilities and intrinsic strengths, they can create some vocational training programs so that it will benefit thousands and lakhs of students. So vocational training is something all of us have to take very seriously.
Thank you, sir. On the language, there's one question from Roshan. In the age of globalization, how the learning of Indian languages can boost up our diplomacy and international relations? And the other question comes from Ashish. He asked a very specific question that does National Education Policy 2020 offer some more inputs on the access to education, especially in terms of those living in the margins and the poor people?
Yes, both are important concerns. First of all, let me go to the second question. We are talking about people who are from the disadvantaged sections. Now, if you teach them in English, in mother tongue, instead of teaching them in English, will they not become more disadvantaged because they will not have good opportunities? Here, the point that we are emphasizing is by imparting education in mother tongue, we want to make them more creative. We want to make them more innovative. And scientific evidence clearly suggests, as the example that I gave of the Japanese professor who did research on brain. So would you like them to become more creative and innovative, or you don't want them? And the best approach to make them more innovative and more creative and stand on their own legs is to teach them in mother tongue. And if they become self-confident because they have understood the world using a tool that they understand, then as the second professor who has published a paper just a few months ago in 2020, she very clearly said that the initial education, if it is in mother tongue, the second language will be built on the foundations of the first language, and then it becomes easier to learn the second language. And anybody, whether they are from villages or towns, anybody has the opportunity to learn English and use it as a tool of communication. And coming to the second point about diplomacy and international relations, of course, English is a tool that we use to communicate across the table with so many people across the world. But it is not just only the language which plays the key role. It is just a tool. If your diplomacy has to be successful, if your international relations have to be good, you have to remember that respect comes from strength. We need to strengthen our country. We need to strengthen each individual in our country so that they become confident and stand on their legs. And that is the purpose of this education policy. And once you become confident, it will not be difficult at all for you. If you are negotiating with Chinese, perhaps you will learn Mandarin and then negotiate with them. And if you are negotiating with some other country, you will learn English and then negotiate with them. So it is as easy as learning another language. So therefore, I don't buy this argument that if you don't study in English medium, you will lose out the opportunities. Or if our sisters and brothers from the disadvantaged sections are not taught in English, they will lose out the economic opportunities. These are all ghosts that people are creating in air without really understanding the importance of studying in mother tongue.
Okay, thank you, sir. There is one more question, important question. Does NEP has any detailed plan for training teachers, especially in terms of higher education? And how does, as you also spoke in your lecture in the beginning, National Education Policy 2020 emphasizes on the role of moral education and ethics building in its policy document? So,
Right. During COVID-19 pandemic, we have learned to use the digital platforms to connect with the students. But unfortunately, what some teachers are doing is that they are trying to transport the ineffective teaching methods from the physical classroom into the online platforms. The reason why I'm mentioning is that for a teacher to be effective, it is important that they put a conscious effort in becoming an effective teacher. Teaching is a profession that one cannot take lightly. Having said that, nobody is a born teacher. All of us can acquire those skills. But unfortunately, even if you look at IITs, you don't have a separate unit where you can mentor the teachers so that they become effective teachers. We simply assume that if just because somebody has a PhD from Stanford University or MIT and he comes and joins here, you immediately give them a first year BTech course to teach. It's not going to be easy at all. So there are several things that we need to do in order to train our teachers to become effective teachers. You know, many teachers, they think that a teacher's job is to teach. And I often told my younger colleagues that a teacher's job is not to teach, but to create an ecosystem in the classroom so that the students become the best learners. And how do you do that? Whether it is physical teaching, whether it is introducing technology into your teaching processes, there are only 4 steps that you need to do. And this is very well explained by Adi Shankara long ago. He said there are 4 things that our students should involve themselves with the help of the teacher. And what are they? Patanam, Mananam, Chintanam, and Sankirtanam. Patanam, you have to study. That is the first step. Mananam, you have to remember. Your memory has to be improved. And Chintanam, you have to critically think about what you have studied, what you have remembered. Sankirtanam, you have to repeat the whole process. And modern psychology also says that these 4 things are the roots of learning process. And the teacher has to do this. The teacher has to engage the students constantly inside the classroom, outside the classroom, so that they are constantly doing this process. And unfortunately, our teachers need to be trained in this. And there's a great need in every institute to introduce this. And in fact, National Education Policy also has a National Institute for Education Technology, so that some of these best practices can be imparted to the teachers so that they become effective teachers. So I really emphasize that teachers have to be trained. And what is the second question that you asked?
It was on the ethics and moral education in terms of education and teachers.
Right. You see, when it comes to ethics and morals, this is something that we cannot teach, right? We can only expose the students to situations so that they learn what is a proper ethical model that they have to follow, and then they have to be exposed to certain philosophical aspects of our life, right? Through discussions, through lectures, through reading material. I often tell that there are 3 important philosophical questions that one has to understand. Who am I? Which is a metaphysical question. We rarely think about who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here? Right? And how do I know what I know? How is that I'm learning about the entire world around me? What processes take place? How do I learn? What do I learn? And then the third most important thing is, how do I attach value to what I learn, to my knowledge, so that I can make decisions in my life? Now, these are questions that one need to ask oneself and then acquire the answers. And over a period of time, we build on our value system and ethical models. But there is no, one has to emphasize this, whether it is in research or in academics or in our personal life or social life, the importance of values and ethics had to be emphasized. And one way of learning them is, for example, we have great epics in our country. When you read Mahabharata and Ramayana, when we look at the kind of dilemmas that they undergo and how they overcame those dilemmas, it teaches us something. You know, so therefore, exposing our children right from the childhood to some of the great literature that India has is very, very important. And I'm hopeful that in the national education policy, we will introduce some of these concepts in our textbooks right from childhood. And there's a great need for it.
Thank you, sir. There's one question from Kunal. He asked this: does a national education policy aims to end up with the board education system, and how will it contribute positively in terms of secondary education? Because boards are very important exams, and if they are not going to be conducted, what is the new change?
Right. You know, because of the limited resources that we have in the universities, there are 2 points here that I would like to mention. One is the way we admit the students in our higher educational institutes. It is more by elimination than selection. It is absolutely not a selection process at all. You just eliminate them. And there's a huge competition. The person who gets the highest rank will get the admission. But what about those who couldn't get those top few thousand ranks? Are they any less? Definitely not. They have full potential. It's just that they couldn't get into those top ranks. So therefore, national education policy also thinks about, don't just put all your eggs in one basket and say this rank is what gives you admission. We need to look at other aspects of the students' capabilities also. So this will go a long way in removing pressure from the minds of these students. And the other one is, there's too much emphasis on getting highest marks in the board exams is another thing that has damaged the psychology of our students, right? You know, in a lighter vein, somebody said the child comes home and says, mother or father, I have 99% in my plus 2 exams. And the father says, daughter, what happened to that 1%? You could have got 100%. So we have become so mad about these percentages. And I have often seen that people who are not in this top bracket also have done exceedingly well in their life. Therefore, this madness on emphasizing ranks and the top marks and things of that nature has to be discouraged. And that is why national education policy also is saying that the board exam may be conducted multiple times and the best of the opportunities may be taken. And these kind of reforms are required. Number one, there is huge peer pressure on the students to somehow get the highest marks, even without having really acquired the real knowledge. And then parents themselves, it's the peers, the parents, and the society, and it is they who need to be educated. I think the national education policy should bring a transformational change in our attitude to this kind of emphasis on this rat race. I'm sure it will go away.
Thank you, sir. This is perhaps the last question because I've tried to.
We are running out of time. Yeah.
Running out of time. As much as possible. और ये सवाल हिंदी में है और this is relevant also. आपके अनुसार नई शिक्षा नीति में वो कौन सी बातें हैं जिन्हें ऐड किए जाने की आवश्यकता है? आपके सुझाव ताकि इन्हें आने वाले समय में और बेहतर किया जा सके. Your suggestions on NEP to make it more proper for the future.
Could you please repeat that question in Hindi?
आपके अनुसार नई शिक्षा नीति में वो कौन सी बातें हैं जिन्हें और ऐड किए जाने की आवश्यकता है? Your suggestions on NEP.
All right.
To make it more appropriate.
Right. No, one good thing about this national education policy is that it is very open to suggestions and feedback. And national education policy is not the end of the road. It is only the beginning of the road. As we traverse this road, as we learn through experiences, if there are some good aspects that need to be introduced into the national education policy, I'm sure the framers of NEP are aware of that. And the national education policy is going to be a dynamic policy for us. And through experience, we will incorporate all the good things that need to be incorporated.
Okay, so thank you very much. Over to Dr. Ruby. Unmute yourself.
You can unmute yourself.
Ruby ma'am, to you.
Varsha ma'am, you can take up questions from Facebook. Few of the questions from Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, sir. First of all, I want to congratulate you for such an enlightening and thrilling talk. Right? It is, I think, the most gripping session because no one has moved out from this session. Right? Usually we see in the webinar someone has joined and then left out, joined and left out, but I think everyone was holding the seat over there. You have very clearly you emphasized on the quality of life through various small interesting stories of your life, right? And you also emphasized on the importance of mother tongue in learning and creativity. Most of the questions because lots of appreciation is there here, but most of the questions has been answered because the almost same type of questions were there
Actually,
regarding the, yes, please.
I have another meeting. I have to move out. Perhaps it
Yeah,
may be.
so just one or two questions I can take because these are related to research basically. Okay, this is what is the, please elaborate more on the research at undergrad level.
Yes. So the national education policy, it also emphasizes on learning through experience. It also tells that for 10 days, for example, it's a bag-free school. You don't have to worry about your studies. Perhaps during these 10 days, you may visit a poet's house or a dancer's house or some other a scientist's house and learn. This is how you become more curious. And curiosity is the first step if you want to become a good researcher. And in my own experience, I have seen that undergraduate students have high potential for research. Somehow, sometimes we underestimate their potential. And this I am telling from my own personal experience. Some of the best papers that I have published, they are written by my fourth year BTech students as part of their project work. So in NEP, there is a great emphasis on involving and introducing research component right at the undergraduate level. And that is where they are talking about this 4-year BS program. And as part of this program, you will also be trained in the research methodologies and perhaps even take up a small research problem and find a solution to that. The advantage of that, introducing 4-year BS program, is that if you are research oriented, you can directly join in a PhD program. And in the next 3 or 4 years, you can complete your PhD and become a productive professional, either as a researcher, as an academician. So the national education policy is also looking at cutting down the time period so that in the most effective period of the lives of the students, they remain productive. Remember, the average age of the Nobel laureates, the average age at which they did that wonderful work which gave them the Nobel Prize was 29 years. They might have got some of them Nobel Prize at the age of 70 or 80, but the average, so as you cross 30 years and beyond, your creativity levels go down. So therefore, the national education policy, it gives great opportunity for students to be creative and productive. And I look forward for its implementation. And I'm very hopeful that our Indian students will do outstandingly well.
Sir, next question is related to this only. So what would be the tenure of masters? When undergrad course is 4 years, then what would be the tenure of masters in new education policy?
Well, the existing master's program may still be there, 2 years programs, because often you see there are people who are in industry, they have worked for some time, they want to come and refresh their knowledge. They may come and then take up these master's programs. But for a student who is joining immediately after +2, you just do your BS, and then if you are good enough, you have potential for research, and then you go for a PhD program. So those master's programs will continue. And then you will have other kinds of compressed master's programs that we have introduced in JNU. In our School of Engineering, we have a 5 years dual degree program. First 4 years, students study core engineering, but in 5th year, they get a master's degree in one of the areas of social sciences, humanities, languages, international relations. So this kind of flexibility also is a hallmark of the national education policy.
Sir, one more question. If a child who has worked hard to graduate from school is not able to secure a decent living, then don't you think social unrest will be there?
You see, every individual has certain inner potential. And the first step is to recognize your inner potential. And many of us, we fail in our life when we do not function to the fullest of our inner potential. So these are two important things. And then, even if you have potential and you function to the fullest of potential, what is important for us not to get disillusioned in life is to find a purpose for our life. So how do I find out my purpose? First, of course, I will try to find what is that I am passionate about. This is a process. Over a period of time, you find what is that you are passionate about. You may have a couple of areas you are passionate, and then you have to acquire skills in order to put this passion into action. And this is where I am saying that if you have 2-3 kinds of areas in which you have certain potential, if you are not successful in one thing, let's say I want to join in engineering, but I am not able to join in engineering, maybe I will take up law. Maybe if I don't get in law, perhaps I will do something else. So there is no end of the road. The moment we feel end of the road, that is when we feel disillusion. There are enough number of opportunities for us. If we don't succeed in one place, we can succeed in the other place. Now, how do I find a purpose in my life? I first find out what is I am passionate about. I acquire special skills to realize this passion. And then I use this knowledge to find solutions for some real world problems which will fulfill the needs of the people, which will create some positivity in the lives of people around me. Then you say I'm getting connected to this society. I will not feel lonely. I will not feel unrest in my mind. So that is very, very essential. And failures are very common in all our lives. If we give up whenever we meet, whenever we stare at a failure, if we give up, that will not help us. People who are successful, when you look back into their lives, many times they have failed. If I can take 30 seconds, I will tell you one story. How a person, even in the difficult situations also, he faced that difficult situation and came out of that. You know, I was attending a lecture again as a student at IIT Madras, and the Director General Police of Tamil Nadu came and gave a lecture. And he gave an incident of a driver who was driving on the road at night 1 o'clock. And while driving, he kept his right hand on the window, and a part of it was coming out. And from the opposite side, a lorry was coming, and it hit his car. And his hand got separated, and it fell on the road. The lorry fellow, of course, he escaped. And what did this person do? He didn't sit and cry. He opened the door with his left hand. He walked to his severed hand, took it and put it on the seat, and drove to the nearest hospital. And within an hour, his hand was stitched back. That is what I say, that when you face failure, when you face difficulties, you have to stand up and then move forward. Then there is no question of any disillusion and unrest in our minds.
Thank you, sir. Last question from my side. You talked about Ayurveda biology, which you have started in JNU. Are you going to start any such course for faculty members? Because I am interested in this Ayurveda biology.
Right. I know JNU has also established a school of e-learning, and we are thinking of offering several degree courses, both at the undergraduate and master's level. So if you are interested in any of those programs, you can definitely register and get an additional degree from JNU in future.
Yeah, this would be very interesting course. Ayurveda.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you so
Varsha
much.
ma'am. Yes, we are running out of time and sir has also have to leave. Okay, so very interesting session. Even tomorrow, kindly keep your questions, audience. Tomorrow we have Professor Arif Mohammed ji, who has been the member of drafting committee. So there also you can put up the question. Now I invite our principal sir, Dr. Rajiv Agrawal sir, to give away the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ruby. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir, you can go ahead.
Dear friends, good afternoon and namaskar to you all. I know that we are running short of time. I'll try to finish my job within few minutes. When Dr. Ruby came to me about this lecture series, and she told me that we want to start this lecture series with NEP, National Education Policy. And she asked me about the resource person. Immediately, I suggested her that Dr. Jagadesh, he is the best name for this, but the time will be a problem for him. So, sir, we are grateful that you could spare time for us. Today, we experience enlightening delivery by one of the most distinguished academicians of our nation, determined to guide the next generation to a new India. Professor M. Jagadesh Kumar, Honorable Vice Chancellor JNU, spoke at length about emphasized on almost every aspects of NEP in a very short duration, in a very short span of time. We needed such torch bearers amongst us today to make it happen for an all-round education in the upcoming decades for young India. We hope by the new education policy, Bharat will again become the Vishwaguru. We are grateful to you, sir, for the time and knowledge that you showered upon us on today. Hope in future as well, you will be with us. Here, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that without the initiative and inspiration of our beloved chairperson, Professor God, he is the chairman of the Deshbandhu College, but he has been associated with us for the last almost 1.5 years. He is our chief patron. The event would not be possible without his help. Sir, we need more of your constant presence and help in future as well, encouragement for the betterment of our institution. We express our thanks from the bottom of our heart for all initiatives that you are taking for the upliftment of Deshbandhu College. I must thank our dynamic IQAC coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, and our dynamic NSS program officer, Dr. Ruby Mishra, for the initiative and the organizing this lecture series. I must also thank Dr. Sanjay Kumar, Dr. Abhishek Pratap Singh, Dr. Jakpal Grover, Dr. Alok, Dr. Varsha Baveja, Dr. Monica, Dr. Anjana. I may be forgetting some names, for doing all necessary arrangements for today's program. I must thank the whole NSS team of students for organizing this, who were busy, and their hard work shows us that this program could be happening. Last but not least, I must thank all the participants of this webinar for attending this webinar. In the end, I hope the justly launched new education policy will bring all good for us as a new nation, breaking the shackles of century-long alliance learning education system. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ruby.
Thank you so much, Rajiv sir. And there is one more announcement here, and a very important announcement, because there was a question about the teachers training. So there is a Viva has initiated along with Ministry of Science and Technology and MHRD, and on Teachers Day, that is 5th of September, they will launch a program which is known as Siksha Shilpi. So we all can be benefited from there also. And what I can say, BC sir, you as a for us is a live example. आप स्वयं ही एक live example हैं जिन्होंने अपनी शिक्षा पद्धति, शिक्षा जो है, शिक्षण ग्रहण किया अपनी मातृभाषा में, and then you had to switch over to the English language. So in the end, I would just say, and then we will have a national anthem. That is one of the shloka I recite, and this fascinates me also. And this shloka as a whole is like, yes, for pronouncing a shloka, you need little bit of concentration, and that is what the ancient tradition that is with us. Okay, Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukh Bhagya Bhavet. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Now we will all rise wherever we are standing for our national anthem.
Robi ji, just before we just break off and go for the national anthem, once again, sir, I just want to thank you very much for your very insightful words here. It was very, very, clear that you would give a very, very insightful, talk to for our students. And I was really touched by the issues that you raised, especially the basis of mother tongue. Actually, while I was in the United States at that time, I do remember, we used to discuss with some other fellow citizens and the workers that we needed some bondage through our mother tongues. I mean, and I think the new national education policy will bring us together. Language is a big unifier, where I would be happy to learn Telugu, and I hope somebody will be ready to learn Hindi. So those are great points, and thank you very much on behalf of Deshbandhu College. It was very touching, very nice points, and very well articulated. That's what we expected, and thank you so much for your time, sir. Bahut bahut pranam aapko jara. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Bye to all of you, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. After national anthem, I am signing off. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
जय हे भारत भाग्य
जन गण मन अधिनायक